So the next section of this video is going to be the at-home section, and we're going to be going into all of the different things that you can do in order to help the ocean and help the reef from your own home. All right, so number one for this topic is reduce your carbon footprint. This is another massive topic, one that will probably deserve its own video in the future. Or 5. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll see if we can't do a short version of it here. The thing about reducing your carbon footprint is there are so many easy and simple ways to reduce your carbon emissions, and they become so habitual that sometimes you forget that you're doing it. A lot of the actions that I'm going to recommend you may already have heard of before for other reasons. A lot of these are very economical as well as environmentally sustainable, which means if you've read anything about saving money recently, you might see some overlap here. So the first example is conserving power. This is probably the most commonly heard and referenced example of reducing your carbon footprint, and they are usually the easiest thing to start out on. So conserving power can be something as simple as just turning off the lights when you leave the room, or unplugging appliances when you're not using them, or oh gosh, there's so many, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, walking or biking to work instead of driving. There's so many. I couldn't possibly list them all, but now that you've got your gears rolling, you could probably determine a few more. It's just finding out ways to save power just in the small actions that you do in your daily life. If you want to step it up a notch and want to go in for a purchase for energy efficiency, getting energy efficient LED light bulbs or energy efficient appliances in your house is a really great way of conserving some energy as well. A step up from that is opting for renewable or sustainable energy when possible. I know it's not always possible depending on where you are and what you have access to, but if you do have the ability to take advantage of renewable energy options like solar or wind, hydro or thermal, I would definitely recommend taking advantage of it. It is usually a little bit more of an upfront cost. So say you're gonna buy a solar panel for your roof, or if you're gonna invest in an electric car, it is more of an upfront cost, but on the back end you are going to be saving money and saving energy, because you're not going to be spending money on fuel or electricity every month, because it's going to be coming from those sustainable resources. Another example is conserving your water. So in addition to conserving your power, you want to conserve your water as well. This one is less remembered than most of the things on this list, but it is also extremely important, especially for the underwater environment and saving the ocean. You want to make sure that you conserve the water. It's all part of the water cycle. One of the most common ones that I always hear and I always advocate is taking shorter showers. I struggle with this one, but I try really hard. If you're ready to take a bigger step past shortening your shower, you can also look into purchasing water efficient appliances and electronics. Shower heads is a really big one. Water efficient shower heads that produce a higher pressure with a lower amount of water actually coming out, so that helps to conserve water. Same thing can be said for sinks. Toilets is a really big one. The toilets that have like the dual option, 1 and 2, so that helps you to conserve water a little bit. Your dishwasher is a really big one that you can look into energy efficient and water efficient ideas, and that can be really beneficial and save you some water, as well as your laundry. So your actual clothes washer, you can look into doing a water efficient option there as well. Okay, helpful hint number 3 for this list is reduce your plastic waste. So if I haven't driven it home enough already, the ocean is extremely vulnerable to pollution, especially marine debris like plastics, especially single-use plastics. The thing about plastics is that they are not biodegradable, which means that they do not break down back into their natural chemicals and components over time. They simply break up, or they just break into smaller and smaller pieces, and this is called microplastics. Plastics are known to subsist or persist in the environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So take a pause and just think of the single-use plastics that you've used in your life. Say it was a plastic toothbrush or a plastic straw at some point. Just close your eyes and think. That plastic piece is going to live longer than you. It's going to exist on this planet longer than you will. Like I mentioned earlier, marine debris causes all kinds of problems and deaths with the local environment. It can wrap around different species and entangle them. They can strangle, they can choke on it, they can swallow it, and then they can die of starvation. But even if an animal doesn't die of starvation due to plastic, that plastic can accumulate in their stomachs, and it can be in the smallest bellies all the way to the largest bellies. So even tiny microplastics, which have broken up over the years, is still consumable by zooplankton, which is the kind of base primary consumer of the ocean food web, and everything else eats everything else, and so that plastic will just work its way up the food chain and will bioaccumulate, or it'll accumulate over time as the predators are consuming more and more of those, and all of a sudden you've got massive quantities of plastic in the stomachs of your ocean predators. And guess who is at the top of the ocean food web, guys? Us. So scientists actually believe that depending on the person's diet, human beings can consume up to a credit card's worth of plastic every month, depending on what you eat. We're putting our trash into the ocean, and it's coming full circle, and then where it's going to end up in our food. There are so many really great ways to reduce plastic in your daily life. There's metal straws, there's bamboo cutlery, you can get reusable glass or metal cups or mugs to take with you when you travel. You can get reusable canvas grocery bags. So that's like kind of like your easy starter kit for reducing your single-use plastics. If you want to step it up a notch, you can actually really push and try and get rid of all of the plastics in your home, just kind of going through the house one step at a time. It is a little bit overwhelming at the beginning. I know from personal experience when I first started my kind of zero waste journey, but it is definitely worth it, and I would very much recommend. Not only is it good for the environment, but it's very good economically, because once you make that initial purchase, you don't have to buy the disposable stuff ever again, so you're saving money. If you have not seen my video, it's called Top 10 Sustainable Products for Your Home, I think it's called that. I'll link it above. If you haven't seen that, make sure you take some time and go watch that. It gives the list of the top 10 items and a bunch of different examples of things that I use. It was kitchen edition, so it's all the things that I use in my kitchen in order to get rid of the disposable plastics. And remember, if you can't remove all of the plastic waste from your life, I understand sometimes it's a little difficult with the way like grocery stores package food and whatnot. There's always going to be something that slips through, unfortunately. But just remember, if you do have any plastic waste or any waste, that you dispose of it responsibly. A lot of places offer recycling opportunities, especially for plastic, such as plastic bottles. You can also recycle other types of plastic, but you do have to delve into what types of plastic the recycling centers will accept. That's probably another video. Let me know if you get confused about what kinds of plastics you can recycle and which ones are okay. Typically, you can also recycle metal, like metal cans. You can recycle cardboard or paper. You can recycle glass containers. So there's all kinds of things that are able to be recycled. So you just need to look up your local waste management guidelines and see what's available in your area. Helpful hint number 4 is be mindful of harmful chemicals and pollutants. I think when it comes to the ocean, we all know that pollution is really bad for the ocean and its inhabitants, but I think most of the credit and most of the attention right now tends to go towards the like the physical rubbish. So like your marine debris, like your plastics, get all the attention. However, especially when it comes to coral reefs, but this goes for any ocean ecosystem, the chemical pollutants actually are extremely detrimental to those environments because of how pervasive they are. Unfortunately, the use of harmful chemicals associated with coastal development has been deemed responsible for significant coral damage here in Hawaii. So you want to avoid toxic chemicals like herbicides and pesticides herbicides. These chemicals are obviously not good for your lawn either, but when they wash down into the waterways and down the waterways into the ocean, they actually create what are called dead zones. And a dead zone is essentially what happens when the chemicals in the water create a completely uninhabitable environment. There's too high of a concentration of that chemical and it kills everything in the vicinity. The same can be said for fertilizer, but almost like the opposite effect. The fertilizer can wash into the ocean or into the waterway and it'll create an algae bloom. So it'll create too much life, too much plant life, and will create an anoxic environment, which means that the algae sucks all of the oxygen out of the water and creates a dead zone because the fish cannot live in an anoxic environment. Another important thing to remember is that you don't want to dump household, vehicle, or commercial chemicals down storm drains or street gutters or anywhere near a waterway, because all of those chemicals that we use in our house or on our cars or in our stores or businesses or whatnot, those can have very, very similar outcomes to the herbicides and the pesticides. And don't get too comfortable thinking that you live too far away from the ocean for this rule to apply to you. No matter where you are, if you are near a waterway or even if you're not that close to a waterway, all waterways lead to the ocean, and scientists have shown in the past that pollutants that come from way upriver have made it to the ocean and caused a serious impact. If there is an accidental spill and there is chemicals in a place where there shouldn't be, please make sure that you mop it up, clean it up appropriately. If it is too big for you to handle, make sure that you call the appropriate authorities, because it can be really damaging to your local environment and environments at a distance away. The next example is choosing to buy locally. So anything that was made, produced, or farmed in your area is a really great way of reducing carbon emissions. Not only is it supporting your local economy, which is also beneficial and sustainable, but it's also reducing the amount of transportation necessary. And if you are buying something from really far away, a truck has to load it up and then bring it all the way to you. So there's going to be some carbon emissions involved in ordering something or buying something from far away. So buying locally and eating locally is a really great way of reducing your carbon emissions. And last but not least is eating more fruits and veggies. I know that sounds a little bit like your mom, but I promise that it's true. Vegetables and fruits have been proven to have a far smaller carbon emission than meat products. Having meatless meals or meatless days of the week helps you to reduce your carbon footprint by significantly cutting down the amount of emissions related to farming the animals, processing and transportation and feeding of those animals. So that's a really great way to cut down your footprint. It is important to remember, however, that just because it is a fruit or veggie doesn't necessarily mean that it is more sustainable. This option, this example does require a little bit more homework in learning about what you're eating, because a locally caught fish or a neighbor's homesteaded chickens is more sustainable and has a lower carbon footprint than, say, palm oil from Borneo, which go look that up if you haven't heard of it. That was a pretty tragic one, or something of that nature. So make sure that you are doing your homework when it comes to choosing a sustainable food option, because it's not black and white. It's not just veggies versus meat. There are sustainable options across the board, but in general, if you were to look at the whole scale, fruits and veggies typically have a lower carbon emissions rate than the meat industry. Speaking of the food industry, choosing sustainable seafood. So sustainable seafood is a huge way to reduce your impact, your negative impact on the ocean, because unsustainable fishing is a major contributor to damage in the ocean and on the coral reefs. There are so many absolutely terrible fishing practices that I've seen over the years living on different islands around the world. And, it's not a poor reflection on that area. It's usually associated with poverty. But it's just incredible the types of fishing that I have seen in the past. For example, one of the worst ones I can think of is dynamite fishing. which, if you haven't heard of that, is exactly how it sounds. Fishermen, in order to get as much fish on an outing as possible, will actually use explosives, sticks of dynamite, to essentially create a shock wave through the water. So they'll blow it up at the surface of the water, and those shock waves will actually shock and kill all of the fish in the vicinity. And then when they die, they'll float up to the surface, and then the fishermen can just go around and just collect all the fish from the surface. It's extremely sad. There's a lot of byproduct or bycatch to that, because not every fish that they kill is something that they're going to be able to sell that's consumable. So that's a really, really tragic method. Not to mention, if you explode something underwater, there's going to be unforeseen damage outside of just killing the fish. Like, you're going to kill anything that is sensitive to that sound. It's going to be your invertebrates. It could have a potentially damaging impact on your corals. That is your whole area, and all the living components in it being impacted by the fishing. So it's really, really sad. Another really sad one that I can think of is bleach bottle fishing. Again, it's exactly how it sounds. Fishermen will poke holes into a bleach bottle and then chuck it over the side and into the area they're trying to go fishing. And essentially what happens is that bleach will start to disperse through the water, and that will send the fish into toxic shock, and then they'll die, and then they'll float to the surface, and then the fishermen can just pick them up. Again, it is just an absolutely atrocious method of fishing. Not to mention, I can't imagine like knowing that is how my seafood was captured, like knowing that my fish has bleach in it and that's how it was caught. Which is why it is very, very important for you to understand where your fish is coming from and ensuring that it was collected sustainably. That being said, I understand it is a little bit of a daunting task when you go to the supermarket and you're standing in front of the seafood section and you're staring at a selection of fish. You want to make sure that you're making the right decision, but you don't necessarily want to sit there and read all the labels. Some of the labels don't even give you enough information in order to know how that fish was caught. What exactly do you do? The good news is there's a really, really cool app created by the Monterey Bay Aquarium that is meant to help the average everyday consumer make those decisions. And that gives you all this information about what kinds of fish that are considered to be in the green, which means it's okay to buy them. They've been either sustainably farmed or sustainably fished. They've got healthy population numbers in the wild, so there's a thumbs up. There is a yellow section, which is like, maybe learn a little bit more. Some of these species, depending on where you are in the world, are being overfished, and some of them are healthy. So just kind of be aware or be cautious when buying this particular type of seafood. And then there's another list, which is the red, which is like the do not pass go. Don't go for that type of fish. It's either completely overfished in certain areas. It's a very unsustainable catching method, or whatnot. It was very unethical. So they do a lot of research, and they are consistently updating the information on the app, so you can be confident that the information that you have is accurate as well as up to date, because things are changing in fisheries, ocean fisheries, all the time. And so you can be confident that you're making the right choices when you go in to buy seafood. And finally, we're going to end on a bonus tip that you can use no matter where you are, and that is educating yourself and spreading the word. It is extremely important. It's probably the most important thing that you could do out of this whole list. Believe it or not, you are helping the reef right now just by watching this video. And that is because you are reaching out and you are educating yourself. You've obviously had to search what is a coral, what is coral bleaching, and how can I help save the reef, which is the first and most vital step in saving the reef. As you can see, I am also doing my part by spreading the word. One of the best parts about my job is that I am not only a marine scientist, but I am also a public educator, which means a large portion of my job is to teach the public about the ocean, about the plight of the corals and the different threats that they face, as well as the different solutions that we have in order to make the oceans a better place and to reduce our impact. So that is just a really satisfying thing for me to feel. And the cool thing is not only am I teaching you by spreading the word, but hopefully with any luck, you will then go on and teach your friends and family about the things that you can do in order to save the reef, which has essentially a compounding effect. All right, everyone. Well, that about wraps up this video and is the end of the third episode of the 3-part series. So that kind of wraps it all up. Thank you guys for joining me. I have a feeling that this video is going to be long. I've not edited it or anything. Like, I just know I've been talking for a bit. So if you've made it to the end, thank you for sticking with me there. I hope that you feel that it was worth your time and that you have a lot of fun information to go forth with. I know the topics were pretty dense in the last 3. You may even need to go back and rewatch certain sections in order to really get the information. If you have any questions, make sure you leave that in the little comment box below, or even if you have any recommendations for a future video, if there's anything you want me to elaborate on, feel free to put that down there as well. I'm always down to make more educational videos. I have a feeling there's some future YouTube videos hidden in this video. There's some things that I had a really hard time making it short, as you guys could probably tell. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me this week, and I'll see you guys around next week. Mahalo.